Okay, so hello and welcome back to another Unity C# Bitesize tutorial. Today I'll be covering the basics of raycasting as a way for the player to interact with objects in the scene. I hope you're looking forward to it. Let's get started. For today's video, I've created a new folder called Raycasting. In the scenes, I've got just the scene main. I'll explain this in a second. And then in scripts, I've made one script called Raycast Example, and I've stuck that Raycast Example script onto the camera. Everything else is just normal: the light source, post-processing, the floor, the player has nothing else on it, and then the wall over here. A raycast is part of Unity's physics engine, and it is simply a line that you draw and you can get data back from it. So for example, you can get the data back on what you hit, how far it traveled before you hit something, and so on. With that information, you can actually run code on the thing you hit. So for example, if I click in the scene on the wall, I can actually go and grab the renderer and change the color. A more practical use is for dealing damage in a game. So a lot of games have projectile weapons, but they also sometimes have hit scan weapons where when you click, the damage is instant rather than having an actual projectile that travels through the air. So in that case, you actually do a raycast from your gun to where you're aiming, and then it returns the data on what you hit, and then you grab that and you deal damage to it. So there are plenty more uses of raycasts. A couple more I can think of off the top of my head is that you can use it to check how far away the ground is from a particular object by simply raycasting down, getting back the data and checking how far the ray traveled. You can also use it for interaction. So for example, if you can pick up an item by clicking on it in your scene, when you click, you can then do a raycast and see if it hits an item, and if it does, then you can add it to your inventory. Now I think we can jump into the code. So the code setup here, I've simply got a distance float so we can define how far the ray goes. So by default, if you don't specify a distance, it just goes off forever until it hits something. You can specify a max distance. So for example, if you're doing the pickup scenario I just mentioned, maybe there's a max range at which you can pick up items. So if it's too far away, then you can't pick it up. We need reference to the main camera because raycasts, for the example I'll be doing, it's done from the camera. Now, I've put the script on the camera, so technically I could just get the camera from this object, but that means that doing it this way, you don't actually need to have the script on the camera. It could technically be anywhere, but for now I've kept it like this. So in the start method, we go and grab the main camera. Then every frame we say, well, if the left mouse button wasn't pressed, return, but if the left mouse button was pressed, then fire a raycast, and currently that means nothing because we're going to write this logic together. Okay, so we'll start off by typing physics, because it's in the physics class, .raycast, okay? Now, raycast actually has 16 overloads, which means 16 different variations of parameters you can use. So the first one is just array, then there's array at a max distance, so you can specify when to stop, and so on and so forth. There are many, many different variations, and we're not going to go through them all today. I'm going to just cover the ones that make sense for this video. Feel free to go and look up the rest. So we're going to use number 6, which takes an array, then it passes out some hit info, which is basically the data from the raycast, so, what it hit, how far it traveled, and then the max distance, which tells it where to stop. So let's go and make the ray. So we want a ray, we'll call it ray, and it's equal to, now luckily there's a method on the camera, so main camera dot screen point to ray, okay? So it's going to give us a ray from where this position on our screen, okay? Screen point to ray. So where on the screen do we want to draw a ray to? It's actually going to be our mouse position. So mouse dot current dot position dot read value. Okay. Whoops. Let's zoom out a little bit. Okay. So that's our ray. Let's pass that in. Then we actually need to get out some hit data. So that's called a raycast hit. So out raycast hit, and that's called hit. And then the, let's go for number 6. The max distance, we've actually got it up here. It's distance. Okay, so distance. So that is going to do us a raycast. Okay, but the problem is we don't know right now whether it actually hit anything or not. Now, luckily, this method raycast is a bool, which means we can say if, and then do this. So now we have some logic here. We can write whatever we want here about this raycast. So if we hit something, do this. Okay, now hit has this information on it. You can check the thing you hit, the point at which you hit at, the normal of the thing you hit. There's so much data there that you can use if you need to. We just simply want to, for this first example, just log whatever we hit, okay? So we can say debug.log hit.collider.name or something, okay? So that's going to give us the name of the thing we hit. Whenever we click, we draw a ray to where our mouse position is, and then log the thing we hit if we hit something. Let's go test it. So if we go into our scene and click off in the distance, nothing happens. If we click on the wall, it says wall, player says player, and floor says floor. Okay, so that all works now. one other thing we can do, which makes our lives easier for debugging, is we can actually draw a ray to visually see, where the ray goes. Now this is only visible in editor mode, we won't see it in the game. If you want to do that, then you have to do it differently. So I'm going to say debug.drawRay, okay? We're going to draw a ray from where? Well, ray.origin, okay? In which direction? Ray.direction. But here we actually have to specify the distance, so times distance. And then it wants a color, so we'll say color.red, we'll draw a red ray. And how long does it last for? We'll say 1 second. Because if it doesn't last at all, then it's going to be very hard to see it because it instantly disappears. So we'll say make it last 1 second. If we go back into play now, we'll actually see from our camera when we click a ray shooting off for 10 units. Okay, so now you notice if I click on the wall here, it actually goes straight through the wall. It actually would hit the floor. Okay, if I go down here, whoops, you can actually see it goes through the wall and then through the floor. But notice how just because the debug ray goes that far doesn't mean the real ray does. The ray here, the real one, that gets stopped at the first object hit. Okay. Now with this, once you've got access to the collider, you can do whatever you like. You know, with hit.collider, you can then get a component. And with this, you can then say, you know, get component, and then if you had health, you could say get the health, and then, and then deal damage or whatever, right? It's up to you. So you can do whatever you want when you click. For this example, we're going to just change the color to be a random color. So we'll say, let's get the renderer of the thing we hit, okay? Renderer. If I can type, renderer. Okay. And then we want to get the material. And we want to set the color. Now, because I'm using the universal render pipeline, the way you do this is you do underscore base color, like so. And then you actually give it a color. So new color. And then I'm going to say r equals random.range between 0 and 1. Whoops. And then we'll just copy paste this 2 more times. And this is red, green, blue. Okay, so now what happens is whenever we click something, we draw a raycast. If we hit it, then we go and get its renderer, and then we set the color to be a random color. All right, let's go test it. So if I click off in the distance, nothing happens. If I click on the floor, okay. Now notice how it doesn't work if I click really far away on the floor because that's longer than 10 units. If I click closer, it actually works. So that's showing the range working. And then it doesn't matter what we click on, okay, it works all the time. So there you go. That's it. That's a really simple bite-sized video on raycasts. So that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe. Let me know down below what you want to see next in this series. I'll see you all next time. Thanks for watching, and goodbye. But of course, before I go, I've got to thank my patrons. Special thanks to John Salig, Liz Kimber, Drandy, Jean Ran, David McDermott, Exit, Josh Folsom, Bearded Eye, Dustin Miller, Rack, Yoris Letter, Renee, and Remy Baldwin. If anyone else is able to help support the channel monetarily, link to my Patreon is down below. If not, there are also links down below to other social media, such as Twitch, Twitter, and Discord, as well as our website. If you could help us out by following on any of those, that would be greatly appreciated. I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.